We're at the West Pennsylvania First Lego League Championships, and we're
Dr. Troop,
here with a team from Jamaica. It's the Lego
we'll
Your Mind
start with the
Lakers,
opening
and it's
presentations with
sponsored
you,
by
opening comments with you,
Foundation.
and then I'll remind everybody else as we go along.
As a mentor, we basically teach and assist the kids in learning robotics. We help them.
Welcome back, everybody. It's time now for our fireside chat. Before I introduce the guests, though, we are going to be rather running a poll online on the platform. So we want you to go ahead and participate in the poll that we are running online. And then just after that, we will introduce the guests for this fireside chat. We have 3 of them on the podium with me and 3 of them online as well. So there's a question is, what do you understand STEAM education to mean? It's a multiple choice question. All right, so while we wait for some of the responses to our Zoom poll, let me just introduce the members of this fireside chat, which is looking at national vision for STEAM education in Jamaica. And I will begin with, to my right is Mr. Wayne Robinson. He's acting principal at Jamaica College. To his right is Dr. Casson Troop. She is Chief Education Officer, Acting Chief Education Officer at the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information. And to Dr. Troop's right is Dr. Andre Coy. He's a lecturer in the Department of Physics in the Faculty of Science and Technology at the University of the West Indies, Mona. We also have online Dr. Albert Benjamin. He's Vice President of Academic Affairs, Acting Vice President of Academic Affairs at Michael University College. We have Mr. Louis Serra. He's Regional Schools and Non-Formal Education Head at the British Council Americas. And we also have online Mr. Arturo Caricarte. He's Manager of Technical Training, Learning and Development Institute at the Jamaica Public Service, the JPS, as well as Mr. Anthony Smith. He's Chief Operating Officer at PBS Technologies. And we're going to begin by setting the stage for this discussion, for this fireside chat. by getting some initial opening statements from our panel. And I will begin with Dr. Troop.
Hi, good afternoon, Archie. Good afternoon to our listeners. I'm the Minister of, should I take off my? Yes, part of the pandemic situation, the reality of the times. Well, just from the ministry's perspective, we're appreciative of this initiative from the British Council and for us to use this platform to share what we have been doing in education. It is really the thrust of the Ministry of Education to provide quality education. And we believe that the STEM approach is one of the most important approach to use in the delivery of education in Jamaica at this time. So our policy has been shifted. Since 2016, we have delivered a brand new curriculum into our education system that is embedded with the STEM principles. You may hear me say STEM, because that's how we do it here. Initially, we started out with a STEM philosophy, and we have now moved to integrate the arts in it to talk about the STEAM, because we do value that important concept. We believe at the Ministry of Education that this is what is required for us not to just produce users of information, but we want creators of new divisions. We want creators of new research and users of technology, not just what others have developed for us, but we believe as a country, it is the responsibility of the education system to make sure that we can deliver creators into the system. So that's what the approach has been for us. So we have a policy, a STEM ICT policy in education. We have been working with the tertiary sector to build out our STEM economy, or what we call a STEM ecosystem, to include all the players in education. So you will hear a little bit from Dr. Benjamin about what we're doing with the Jamaica University College at this time with respect to the teacher component of it. So we believe in the methodology of STEM. And so within our curriculum, we have been building out the capacity of our teachers to integrate the disciplines and exposing our students to the key principles of science, technology, engineering, and math. In recent times, you would have heard our minister talking about just the recent inclusion of coding in our school system. This is again a part of our thrust to make sure that the exposure is being given to our students very early. So we will have students exposed to the principles of coding from grade 1 right up to grade 13. And our grades 13 students will have the opportunity to leave our secondary system certified at the the NCT vet examination level 1 and level 2 in coding. We have been working with some of our partners to look at robotics in the education system. And my principal will talk about that competition that we have been supporting in our school for the integration of those science principles. So we're at a good place in Jamaica. The education system is robust. We are about to launch 6 new STEM schools across our country. You'll be hearing more about that. We're in the developmental phase. Our minister spoke about that earlier. And that will definitely focus on STEM, teaching the STEM within their extreme disciplines as we build from the foundation that we will have introduced during the grade 7 to 9 programs. Embedded in that would be the methodologies of integration and building out what the teachers would be exposed to throughout our training program. So it's a rounded program, it's a rounded thrust, and we're looking forward to see the outputs, Archie, the outcome and the transformation of Jamaica through these principles that we are integrating.
Thank you very much, Dr. Troop. You're very passionate there when you talk about this issue of teacher training and capacity building, and that's where we're headed next. We have Dr. Albert Benjamin. Dr. Benjamin, may we have your introductory statements as well?
Absolutely. So thank you so much for inviting me to join this conversation. I want to greet Dr. Troop. Always so good to see you, colleague Troop. Colleague members on the panel. Good afternoon to you, and good afternoon to all those persons participating in the actual physical space, as well as those who are observing, like myself, online. Now, Michael University College, we're delighted for the opportunity to participate in this national visioning for STEAM education for Jamaica. I have, in fact, put together a brief presentation for these next 2 minutes or so. I've asked for it to be uploaded. Can I get that up now, please? And as the presentation comes up, I want to localize what I will be saying on essentially two areas. What are the problems that would affect the implementation of this vision? And subsequently, what are the plans that the vision, at least an aspect of the plan that the vision should seek to address? There are three problems I will identify on my slides when they come up. The matter of performance of our education system, the matter of throughput, and this could be an index of performance as well, and also the matter of participation. One of the earlier presentations, it spoke about, I think it was from our presenter from the UK, that spoke about the sort of a sense where young people, while they were interested in science, they did not see themselves with a science identity. They did not see themselves as persons who would want to pursue a career in science going forward. That's quite interesting. So I can share my screen, or will the presentation be coming up? I would need to show the slides to make some points. All right, you're saying I should just present. Okay. All right, now the Ministry of Education has a very sophisticated research arm called told I can share now. Okay, great. Thank you. So the Ministry of Education has a very sophisticated research arm called the National Education Inspectorate. Is everybody seeing my screen?
Yes.
Okay, good. And a baseline study was done in 2015. Remember now I'm talking first of all about the issues that the vision needs to combat. And that baseline study looked at 953 primary and secondary schools. 8 parameters were inspected. You can see them there from 1 to 8. Because of the short time that I have, I won't go into telling you what each one is, but I want to focus on one of them. But just before I focus on that, each area was scored according to a 5-point rating scale. I think, okay, you have the slide up now. Okay. And that rating scale from 1 to 5, 5 exceptionally high, 4 good, 3 and no 3 is highlighted. This is the minimum level of acceptability that was expected from the schools. 2 unsatisfactory, 1 needs immediate support. Now on the right there, you will see a table extracted from the NEI of 2015, this baseline study. And I want you to focus on the most extreme column to the right. Now it's exceptionally high, good, satisfactory, unsatisfactory, needs immediate support. But look at the right. Exceptionally high, they had 0%. Good, 5.7%. Now remember, 5.7%, the good is what we want to see for most of the schools or for all schools, but only 5.7% where overall teaching support is concerned was observed. And you saw basically between satisfactory and unsatisfactory, mostly satisfactory, however, being the score in terms of a look at the teaching support that was examined through this study. Now, in relation to the teaching support, there were a number of areas that were looked at. Knowledge of the teachers, methods that were used to teach, and performance. And you can see also here the ranging. So what you're finding is that we're not seeing knowledge and methods and performance in the good category, which is where we want to be. We're seeing most of it in satisfactory and unsatisfactory. Now, over the time between 2015 and the last time I checked, it was 2017 that data was published. There have been improvements and significant improvements, but please notice that we're still not seeing in the category of good, we're not seeing what we'd like to see. That is where we want most people to be, in terms of most schools to be, in terms of the way that these indexes would operate. But there has been significant improvement, as you can see from the lower slide, over the course of these 3 years. Now I want to put on the table another matter. Now, this is a matter of performance. So you looked at performance in relation to the NEI indexes. Let us look at the CSEC performance. I've used this slide so many times, but I looked at a cohort, well, you could call it a longitudinal, but it was a DEX study from 2008 to 2017, looking at the performance of students over that period of time in the so-called STEM areas. And the bullet point is all I want to highlight. Only about 5,000 of the average 40,000 students sitting CSEC over that period of time and you'll take any science subject. In other words, 85% of our students are not interested in doing science. And that's a part of what we have to think about in our vision. So how do we address the matter of the teacher moving ourselves from the satisfactory to good? How do we address dealing with the apathy, let us say, of our students, certainly at the high school level? Now, I don't have much time, but I want to quickly point out this matter now of human development, where I looked at 2002 number of persons who were born in 2002. About 47,000 brand spanking new Jamaicans were born in 2002. And by the time they were supposed to sit examinations, what you observe is that 34,000 of them sat the examination. So there's a loss of the number of people who were expected to sit and who actually sat. We would like to see in our vision a way to stop that, losing our people before they even finish high school. What has happened? What's causing that attrition? And I know colleague Troop, or CEO Troop, has been paying a lot of attention. The ministry has been paying attention to this problem. So what you find is that for 2002, only 17,000 or 36%, based on the entry requirement for the economy in terms of being able to have three or so CSEC subjects, only about 17,000 or 36% will be able to enter the economy. This is a serious problem. Now, as a result of these observations, a group of investors got together, led by CariMed, Dr. Glenn Christian, in 2019 to develop very much what we're doing now. Look at how nationally, what kind of a long-term strategy we would need to address these deficits, as have been pointed out here. And what we came away with was, first of all, the CariMed group funded a STEM study tour to the United Kingdom and to India. These jurisdictions were selected because A, they have a national education system as opposed to the United States where you have state by state or maybe county by county. So they have a national curriculum, and they also have taken a national ecosystems approach, as Dr. Troop mentioned, to handling the matter of how do they ensure that most of the persons or their people can do STEM or are comfortable with STEM. At the hub of this ecosystem is a national STEAM or STEM center. And I also want to make some quick points here. It would not be feasible to sustain and drive a national growth STEAM focus without explicit policy and specific institutional support. We have the policy that Dr. Troop mentioned. Successful national STEAM models maintain close linkages with industry. So we can't run this as if we're just running a school. We have to maintain key linkages, both at the beginning of this whole concept, as well as later on with industry or with the real world. And private sector and government funding models are critical for these programs. For example, in the United Kingdom, the Tata Foundation has a long-term relationship with the STEM Center there, even though they don't call it a STEM Center. And in the United Kingdom, their STEM Center, Rolls-Royce, has had a continued relationship with that center. So quickly, what does the STEM Center do? Research and development, teacher professional development, popularizing STEAM, building a national STEAM culture, and national STEAM Olympiad competition. So that is what I would like to open with. The point of the vision, we need to address the problems, and we also need to look at how this STEM center would be, because of the experience we have had in terms of in India and in terms of the UK. When you're building a STEM system, a STEM ecosystem or a national vision for STEM, a STEM center is very, very important to enable the process to go forward. And that STEM center would carry out some of the coordinating activities to ensure that there's a continued linkage between the education system and the real world. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Benjamin. A lot to bite into there. And I'm sure that Mr. Robinson, I saw him shaking his head and trying to look at your slides as you made that point, as you made some of those points about, particularly the teaching support that's needed at that certain kind of level, wants to jump in. But just before we get to him, I wonder the extent to which these sorts of challenges are not just Jamaican, but also reflect the kind of what you're seeing across the region. So I want to invite at this point, Mr. Louis Serra, Regional Schools and Non-Formal Education Head at the British Council Americas, to make his opening remarks, and we'll come back to this stage.
Hi, everyone. I'm delighted to be here and very honored to have contributed to this event to happen. Let me introduce myself. I'm Luis Serral. I'm program lead for schools and non-formal education at the British Council Americas. Originally, I am the head for schools at the British Council Brazil. So I'm Brazilian, despite my ginger beard might tell you. And my background is a sociology teacher and a sociologist. So this background actually underlies what I'm going to address in my speech. Precisely because of that, I organized my contribution to echo some of the points raised by Professor Louise Archer and also by Professor Albert just now, because it embodies what I believe is a robust system for science education should look like, and it reflects what the British Council does in several countries in the Americas. So very briefly, just a starting point, just to warm up, the British Council works in an integrated approach to STEM, from basic to higher education, look on how to contribute to the STEM ecosystem. In each country we operate in the Americas. In different countries, we have different approaches, such as coding for kids in Colombia, as my colleague Camila presented earlier today, and the STEM education program in Brazil, where we have like the STEM education hub based at King's College, working collaboratively with more than 30 Brazilian organizations. By organizations, I mean higher education institutions, civil society organizations, and also science museums, because we understand that engagement, STEM engagement, is not only a responsibility of the schools. The science museums play an important role, and then we are working with them. But also we're working with the STEM Learning Center at the University of York, because there are some very interesting research and informative-based teaching, evidence-based teaching approaches that we want to foster in Brazil. We want to nurture and to bring and to share and also to learn, because some of the challenges Brazil, Colombia, and Jamaica also face are the same in the UK, especially when we look with these gender lenses. There are some inequalities that we need to address when we talk about girls and boys' engagement into science. So as Professor Archer said earlier today, there are multiple and overlapping factors embedded both in the socialization and the learning process that affect a young boy and a girl aspiration into science, and also extend that to tech-related careers. And some of the factors can and should be challenged by any school and any school system. I want to echo what Dr. Hamilton Flowers and Professor Arch said earlier today. By adopting learner-centered and inquiry-based collaborative teaching methods can help improve learning for boys and also for girls. And hands-on activities must be offered. But as a sociology teacher, I also advocate that there is no need to have the latest generation lab to foster science literacy skills, which is key to any STEAM project nowadays. Maybe starting small and starting by the early childhood education, by teaching by exploratory methods and approaches. Exploratory learning, such as the Open Ed laboratories developed by the Imperial King College in London, which is a very interesting approach to use the nature and the what is surrounding the school as a teaching tool, as well, an engagement to teach STEM. So I think that's just one of the things I would like to highlight, and just to say, for instance, that the British Council is committed to support the national STEM framework in Jamaica through international cooperation and knowledge exchange. And I believe that's the key to any success in the future. Collaboration, international exchange, learn from each other, because not only Brazil, but the UK has something to share, but has a lot to learn. And that's what's most important, creating mutuality and also good relations that we are able to learn in a collaborative way. So I think that's my opening remarks. Very, very happy to be here with you all. And I hope you could understand me, because my connectivity is not too good today.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sarah. I think a lot of food for thought as we go along. We're going to drill deeper into some of these issues as the discussion continues. But I want to throw that challenge to Mr. Wayne Robinson to follow up right there at Jamaica College, because especially in the context of one of those statements that was made there, I wrote it down. There's no need to have the latest center labs or the latest quality labs. From your perspective, from the teaching and learning perspective, certainly at the secondary level and with your experience at Jamaica College, let's hear your opening statement.
Good afternoon, colleague panelists. Good afternoon to our viewers and listeners around the world. I'm Wayne Robinson, principal of Jamaica College, and I guess I bring to this panel the practical and real experience of the last 2 years when we embarked on a STEAM program in September 2019. Jamaica College is one of Jamaica's premier boys' schools, and we've had a long history of participating in world robotics contests. Actually, we've gone to 9 of them and 5 world championships. And when I started, I'm also an alumnus of Jamaica College. And when I started there 5 years ago as principal, we had more boys in the robotics club than in the CSEC physics class because of what robotics brought. A practical and lively experience. Our decision to take on a STEAM infusion into our first to third form curriculum. And so all our first to third form curriculum now is STEAM infused, and the STEAM methodology is used from first to third form. And it really was what sparked it was me walking around the school one day and looking at the 8 first form classes going on. 3 of the classes were fully engaged with teachers doing the good old sage in front of the stage method, and the boys sitting and paying attention, half of them maybe not paying attention. 1 class fully engaged, very noisy, up and down, very active and doing an activity. And that was the most engaged class, very loud. You thought a market was going on in there. And then you'd pass a couple of the other classes and you'd see boys looking through the window and not so engaged. And so we thought of, why is it that the boys are not engaged for the most part, more than half of the classes? We have to look at that delivery. So that's the first reason. The engagement of our students at lower school made us reconsider how we deliver these lessons. The second thing was, are we really preparing our students for the world that they will see when they leave Jamaica College? Are they going to be prepared for the 4th Industrial Revolution? Are they prepared with the tools for 21st century learning? Are we preparing them for jobs that are not yet out there? And so we thought, again, our methodology is something we had to look at. And so 2019, we started that process. We've had the practical experience of doing that. If you ask me the hardest thing, we were first lucky to get a grant of $500,000 from an old boy. And that enabled us to put in place the things that you need. But can I tell you that was the easier part? And people, you'll shake your head and say, maybe not, but it is the easier part, because changing the mindset of the teachers and training the teachers to deliver was the harder part for us. And it's a work in progress, because it's never complete. We got good foundation from the National Standards Curriculum, because it is organized in a way for STEM, for STEAM. And so we just needed to tweak that a little bit and use that as our foundation. So we didn't have to do a lot of curriculum development. What we needed to change was how we deliver. So we now needed to ensure that we got kits, we integrated the curriculum, we got into critical thinking, we got into hands-on for boys, because we're a boys' school and the boys learn by doing things. And so we made that critical change when we got the facilities. But as I said, the teacher training, we had to employ a STEM coach to take us through teaching all the teachers. We couldn't take for granted that just regular professional development would work. We had to do all the appraisals with STEM in mind. All the lesson plans were STEM lesson plans. And so that coach was essential. And then we had to get a critical mass of teachers who were already interested and grow that mass to teach everybody else. And so that's how we started. We are a work in progress. If I can tell you that we are there, we were not there. We are a work in progress. And each day we learn more about more things that we need to do. We've just been told by the ministry that we're going to go into grades 12 and 13 compulsory. We have to now design a curriculum to ensure that the pathways 2 and 3, because we're a pathway 1 school, pathway 2 and 3 are recognized by what we do. But that foundation at 1st to 3rd form is key. Once we get that STEM infusion there properly done, we need not worry about the rest of the school. So those are my opening remarks. I will share some of the things we've done as we move on and some of the challenges, as Dr. Benjamin said earlier, that we face. And I can tell you the main one again is the mindset and change of how you approach your teaching.
Work in progress, as you say, but Peter Wright in the chat is saying, excellent, JC, always the top team I follow after Mona Prep. By the way, you can leave comments in our chat, and we will share those comments and questions as well. And we'll also be taking questions from members of the audience. You talk about how you're preparing them for the world of work. Let me add one question to that. Are we preparing them to continue their education if they wish to do so? And that's where I want to bring in Dr. Andre Coy. He's a lecturer in the Department of Physics at the Faculty of Science and Technology at UWI Mona.
Thank you, Archie, and good afternoon, everyone. So my vision for the role of universities in this STEAM ecosystem is threefold, and I'll talk you through the 3 things. First of all, we're looking at universities as being coordinating enablers of STEAM. So this is where policy can be developed through research, and we can inform policy through our research, but we can also inform practice through our research. And there's a lot of that going on already, and there's a lot more to come. So we're acting as this kind of link between the policymakers and the practitioners, where we're providing training and research and techniques and technologies for all the stakeholders within the STEAM ecosystem. But the second one is where we're developing innovative teaching and research programs. So traditionally, when you think about infusing the arts into STEM, you think about having science students taking liberal arts courses, right? But then we also need to think about liberal arts students taking science-related courses. And we've been developing some of these things at the University of the West Indies. So we've been working with the Cultural and Creative Industries cluster in the Faculty of Humanities and Education. And we've been developing a program with the Department of Physics where you can look at the physics of sound, the science and technology of music. And this is for liberal arts students who want to dig deeper into their craft, to learn more about the science behind it and to enhance their outputs through doing that. So this kind of innovative, interdisciplinary approach to teaching and to doing research is one that is an important role for universities to play, and one that is being spearheaded in our university. But the third one is where we're looking at outreach. So we're looking at outreach to pre-tertiary institutions. So we're looking at talking to primary schools, bringing the kids in, showing them that science is fun, doing field trips. These are things that were done post-COVID. There are things that we can do virtually, and we're working on how to do that while COVID is rampant in our society. And post-COVID, we can go back to having the children come in and touch things and play with scientific equipment and learn that science is what they do every day of their lives. It's not something that is abstract and for the very bright and for the very well-off in society. But outreach also goes to industry, outreach with the private sector. So we're looking at engaging them in research and development, engaging them in engaging our students to become entrepreneurs and to become more involved in development and in innovation, so that when they leave, we have a workforce. We are preparing people for the workforce that are creative, that are agile, that are curious, and will help us to develop on that level. But we also have some very innovative approaches to outreach. So just this year, we worked with the National Baking Company Foundation, and they funded to the tune of $1 million an innovative program where we're taking the best of our STEM graduates and we're sending them into the classroom to teach for up to 3 years. And this is something that is going to not only help our students who have graduated with their degrees in science and science education to give back to their country, but it's now seeing young people, energetic young people, bright young people going into the classrooms that in non-traditional schools, I should add. That was one of the very important things that Mr. Hendrickson wanted. It had to be non-traditional classrooms. So these kids who would not necessarily be thinking about STEM, they don't see themselves as scientists, they're now exposed to very bright people, energetic people, people who are going to build up the science curiosity and the interest in them. And our graduates are doing very well. We've this year deployed 13 of them so far in the classrooms. And one of them has actually brought a child from a non-traditional high school to enter a competition in, I think it was climate studies, and they actually came second. And this is something that's fascinating. There's an immediate impact, and you see that this university playing this role, this outreach role, joining with industry to make an immediate and profound impact. And these are the kinds of visions that we have for the role of university in the STEAM ecosystem.
And I imagine part of the reason is that there is a natural benefit for industry as well, because some of the problems that they're facing in their sectors can be problems that you can use and infuse in the classroom as learning opportunities. And on that point, I want to bring in Mr. Arturo Caricarte. He's manager of technical training at the Learning and Development Institute at the Jamaica Public Service for his opening remarks.
Good afternoon, good afternoon. My apologies for not sharing my, my camera. It's not to get into the virtual background, plus somehow every time I turn it on, the computer freezes. So my apologies for that. As the JPS technical trainer manager, we know that for many years we have played an active role in providing not just STEM jobs, but also training. Okay. Initially, we were mostly focused on the training of our own employees once we get them on board. But now, for many years now, we actually have opened up into the whole island and through partnerships with HEART and even UTEC. So while in the past, we actually provide training in areas of skills such as vegetation management, tools and equipment use, even the assembly of solar panels and solar systems. We are looking forward to do much more in this area now with the introductions of our distribution automation systems and drones training, even for some of the organizations like Forestry Ministry. And especially our main area of focus will be in electric vehicles training and also on the distributed generation, which actually going to be part of our strategy plan for the next 5 years or so. So you will hear more from us. Those are my few words.
Thank you very much, Mr. Caricarte. We are still getting comments from the folks in the chat. I see Mr. Grantley Sinclair saying, I'm late in joining, was in a training session, but that doesn't matter. You can ask your question and share your comments now. We're going to be directing some of that to members of the panel as we go along. And I see Constant Karai saying, I'm very interested, particularly as my students are mixed or are pathway 2 and 3, but more importantly, I believe this is a great opportunity to integrate teaching and learning across the curriculum and change the way teachers teach and students learn. Before we go into drilling down a little bit more into those discussions and the next steps, I want to bring in Mr. Anthony Smith. He's Chief Operating Officer at PBS Technologies, and he's joining us from Montego Bay, I believe.
Yes, thanks, Archibald, members of the panel. I'll just give a brief background, my brief background, and then I'll share some opening thoughts. So I'm COO for the PBS Technologies Group, which is a technology service provider with offices in the Cayman Islands, Jamaica, Antigua and Barbuda, Barbados, Trinidad and Tobago, and Guyana. And the PBS Technologies Group is part of a larger PBS group that also has offices in Central America, all the countries in Central America. Prior to being with the PBS group, I was CEO for Massey Technologies in Jamaica. And prior to that, I worked with Cable and Wireless as VP for Commercial Operations. So as you can see, I'm not an educator. So I'm probably the misfit in the group, but I'm literally at the business end, where eventually persons will get into the working world. And when I say world, I do mean world. One of the things that COVID has taught us is that we really can make our contribution virtually from anywhere. So we in Jamaica can lock into that worldwide ecosystem, whether we are entrepreneurs or whether we work with corporations, and provide services essentially to that worldwide ecosystem business. Now, what's a business environment? Well, we know we have been talking about VUCA, VUCA for a long time. Things are volatile, it's uncertain, it's complex, and it's ambiguous. That's the world that we live in. That's a business environment that we live in. So in preparing and if I go back to a business perspective, what are businesses looking for? Because implicit in our discussion here is the thought of excellence, right? Can you survive without proper STEM education, STEAM education? Yeah. Can you be excellent? Can we really compete in the world? Because just as we can provide our services virtually anywhere, anybody, anywhere can provide services into our country as well. So the playing field in this VUCA space is also very competitive, right? And if we're going to compete, then we have to be prepared. Our students, the next generation, has to be prepared. And we, the older generation, somebody mentioned about mindset, we have to make that change as well. So in my opening remarks, I just want to highlight the environment that we are working in, that VUCA environment. It is clear that we need more STEM-related jobs, some of which don't exist yet, but which are developing, some are developing. But I want to make the point also that even non-STEM jobs, and I'll just choose two of them really, really briefly, benefit from STEM training. So a person chooses to go into HR, and not everybody will choose a STEM field. By the way, my first degree is in engineering, right? So, and then I did the MBA. So I'm a hybrid, right? STEM, STEAM. A person chooses to go HR, and we do need HR managers because without people, the business is nothing. How the HR manager recruits or supports recruitment is changing. The traditional way of somebody comes in with their first degree, you sit them down, you have a discussion, and they say, okay, this one speaks the best, so let's go. Yeah. Much more scientific. So if that's the way that we're doing it, we're still in the 20th century at best, right? So a knowledge of management of technology is important for the HR practitioner, even though they are not in this, traditional STEAM vocation. If I'm an accountant, why am I doing STEM? What do I care about physics or the principles? And I say the principles still very, very relevant. So yeah, I'm an accountant. I can just be a bookkeeper. I can just prepare financial statements and this tells you what happened in the past. But if you're going to get into analysis and really provide value to the business, this is where understanding the principles in STEM come in. So how, as a business, and I'm going putting on my CEO hat, how well is our forecast matching up to the actual results? What's the correlations that's driving the results? So standard deviation, for example, do we really understand what that is and how that reflects quality and quantitatively something that we can track? No, a standard accountant, they're looking at, what's on the left, what's on the right. But we really need persons who have that STEM understanding. And I was very encouraged because I was going to throw out the challenge. The second to last speaker mentioned about persons who are doing the arts getting some science training. Just briefly, and I'll wrap up in a minute, Archibald, I know we're pressed for time. My son goes to a prominent high school and he has chosen, not my influence, he has chosen to do the sciences. But in sixth form, you do Caribbean studies, and in his high school, compulsory is maths, English language, and English literature. And I was always concerned with students who chose to go the route of arts, that there is why isn't there, apart from maths, why is there no compulsory science subject, even to fifth form, right? I'm not an educator, let me just put that on the board, right? But as a Jamaican, as a parent looking on and seeing what's happening, and as a person in the business world and knowing the value of persons understanding science, it's very clear that persons, whatever role you have, you'll need to manage technology. Very difficult to manage what you don't know, right? So that was one of the challenges I was going to put on the table, but I'm glad to see it is being addressed, and I encourage others to put that in the mix as well. As I said, I'm not an educator, but I believe from my perspective, business perspective, it makes a whole lot of sense, and it would benefit the recruits that's coming in if they have that blend, regardless of the era that they're coming in, that they have that understanding of scientific principles. So those are my opening remarks.
Thanks very much, Mr. Smith. Yes, it is important for people, even communicators. I teach and I learn and I train in this sector, and you have to learn the science of how do you speak, for instance? How do you make actual sound? But we're going to be running our second poll right now, and it's going to be coming up on your screen. So please participate in our Zoom poll. And as we are running that poll and taking that poll, I am going to just summarize the discussions, and then we're going to be heading into some quick comments from members of the audience as well. So again, we're running our Zoom poll, and then in a moment, we are going to be taking questions from the audience and having a discussion with the panelists who are both here on stage as well as virtually. If I could just look at some of the main threads of the discussions while we run that Zoom poll. I'm hearing discussions about policy, particularly as it relates to what's done at the Ministry of Education level and what needs to be done in terms of institutional support. Threads about, and that would also include this issue of partnerships, how our partners at different levels, for instance, industry and indeed at the teacher training level, and teachers themselves engaged to ensure that this STEAM approach is successful, and as well this idea of cross-teaching, having people sort of understand. That's a phrase I'm coining, but perhaps not the most appropriate one. But when I'm talking about people from different parts, different sectors, the liberal arts sector understanding the importance of science and and vice versa, understanding, infusing it at a holistic level. So we're running and taking the Zoom poll right now, and then we are going to be continuing to have that discussion. So again, you can participate in the Zoom poll that is taking place right now. I'm also seeing some of the questions and comments in the chat. We are going to be taking some of those questions and comments soon as we close that Zoom poll, or we're going to make a couple of quick comments, and then discussions on the stage first, and then we're going to be taking some questions from the audience. So just one discussion first from the policy level, and then I see somebody who has been chomping at the bit to participate in the discussion, and that's what we want. We want a participation, want it to be participatory. So let's start the discussion by talking about the policy level and what needs to be done in terms of the next steps. And I want to start with you, Dr. Troop, from that perspective, the policy level, particularly in relation to teaching support and institutional support and creating a policy framework for partnerships.
Yes, thank you so much for that. And just before I run on, I really want to thank Principal Robinson for validating what we have out in the system at this time. Many persons don't know that our curriculum is well developed, appropriate for the 21st century child that we want to produce and for the 21st century sector. Many persons in Jamaica have not gotten a chance to interact with it. But I know persons are listening, and when you hear a principal of a champion school validating the work of the Ministry of Education, I can't miss that. So we are providing the enabling support for our schools in the form of our curriculum. It's STEM ready, STEAM ready, ICT ready, and it's embedded from the early childhood level right up. And so Jamaica is on the forefront, and I don't want us to miss that. Our curriculum is in place, it's ready. In developing and in implementing the curriculum at a policy level, teacher training is very important, capacity. And again, you heard the principal talk about the challenge of that. You know, when you don't come with that orientation, it takes some time to get the mind set shift and the cultural changes that we want in our institution. So that is constantly something that is at our forefront and is ongoing. We have to pay attention to professional development that is embedded in all our school improvement plans. Our principals can tell you a part of the budgetary plan is professional development that happens at our schools. The Ministry of Education from a policy level stipulated 3 national professional development days in our curriculum where we remove our teachers from the classroom and we put sessions in place for them to just focus on building their capacity to deliver the curriculum. Focus areas are sometimes shared and sometimes based on what the school is focused on at a particular time. That time is spent to develop the teachers. We have our Jamaica Teaching Council, again, constantly out there providing the capacity building for our teachers, the professional development. And big in that approach is the organic learning, the sharing, the reflection of what is happening on the ground. How do we capture what Wayne spoke about and building on that? That is what happens with the Fireside conversations convened by JCT and the sessions ongoing that we have built out on our framework. So at the policy level, we are championing, we are having the partnership conversation. Dr. Coy spoke earlier about the Boost program, where we are getting the best of our science teachers into the classroom, into our non-traditional high schools to just stimulate the interest in the sciences, in the technology, in engineering and so forth. So that's kind of the work that we are doing. And of course, you heard from Michael, we are looking at building out a STEM center for Jamaica that will drive the STEM knowledge, build that capacity, facilitate the labs for the teachers to experiment, and of course, connecting that center to the schools that we're about to launch in a couple of years from now. So that's the policy push. That's where we are, but we are building, we are growing, and we are integrating, making sure that our students represent what is required for the next leap and transformation of Jamaica.
Mr. Robinson, same question to you, policy level there, as we talk about what STEAM education should look like for Jamaica, what needs to be done at the policy level?
You know, before I touch it, I'm unashamed in highlighting public-private partnership in this particular development of STEAM technology in schools. And I'm going to underscore what my friend said earlier, Dr. Coy, Butch Hendrickson, and the National Baking Foundation was the genesis of our program at JC, because they have funded all our robotics programs to the tune of millions of dollars. And I did mention earlier, Dr. Tate, who supported our program with the grant that we got for STEM infusion into the entire curriculum. The policy, especially in professional development, is critical, that the ministry provides and continues to support. The ministry has supported the foundation of what we're doing, especially with the curriculum. But it would be important that there is some budgetary support, probably with private sector, to change that mindset and to grow the teachers in the STEM technology, because it is going to be required in the next 3 to 5 years. Our country must show a significant change in how we deliver the curriculum. And that is key. Yeah. I also listened carefully to Professor Archer, it was, earlier, and she spoke about the point of view of the student. And that's so important, what the student comes to the table with, rather than the objective of the lesson, but the point of view of the student. And that is critical. We had something we call a digital sprint at JC at the end of August, where the students were a part of the groups that prepare the lesson plans. And it's a totally different approach to the lesson plan when a student in the class is a part of the lesson planning using the STEAM technology. It is, you get a different perspective of what the class should look like and how the class should be conducted and the engagement in the class. So I'm saying those things from a policy level. Again, we have to look at how we can support the growth and development of our teachers.
We don't always have to reinvent the world, though. So let's look out, we'll reinvent the wheel. So let's look at what's happening internationally as well. And I want to bring in Mr. Louis Serra here from British Council Americas. In terms of what you think and what the sort of policies you've seen elsewhere, what are some of the recommendations you would have from the policy level, Mr. Serra?
Hi again. Well, what I've been doing in the region is actually the region, when I call it region, is the cluster of countries we operate in the Americas and the Caribbean. We go beyond training. And I think that's really important to change the mindset when we think about continuous professional development. So we change the way we look at it when we change the way we do it. We have a CPD, a continuous professional development framework. And based on that, we create different opportunities for teachers to be exposed intentionally and unintentionally, either through a podcast or either through traditional training that you stop everything and take and watch video and do some homework and trying to implement. And above all, what we are doing and internationally is what we understand is the most effective way is actually to combine what you do, what you need into your training sessions. So you have a clear knowledge on how to experiment and having a network to support you to grow your confidence on how to test, try and error. When we were in the break, the student said something about try and error, and that was something very interesting for him. And I think we should use the same approach with teachers. We should give them space. As Professor Archer said, we need to make some room for them to try and to error, because sometimes they're not specialists and they need to learn. And it's really hard to learn when you have, 60 classes like I did in the past. So you don't have a lot of time to learn and to invest in your professional development. But sometimes there are easier ways to approach that by having a profile in TikTok, launching a challenge for teachers to fund their projects, as we do in Brazil through the Girls in STEM program. We open a call to fund innovative ideas presented by teachers along with universities through the outreach strategy. So there are several ways to improve and to push them ahead. So I think that's internationally and locally what we are trying to foster, some collaboration, but to build confidence, to build skills collaboratively, because that's the way I think everyone learns and improve. I think that's my input here.
Thanks, Mr. Serra. I want to take a question from the audience at this point. We'll go ahead and take a question from the audience.
Thank you for the opportunity. I suppose it's more of a comment more than a question. I wanted to particularly point out that the description of the national standards curriculum is really about being competence focused. And that approach, where you have that constructivist approach at its center, I fully support. I want us to be aware that that's over 100 years old. So it's not that that by itself is new, but definitely doing that is the right thing. What I heard Mr. Robinson describe is happening at JC is in fact incorporating that. It just happens that it's with robotics and electronics, which are wonderful ways to attract our young people to technology, to science, and so on. So I think the key thing here is there's a separation between what we're trying to achieve by focusing on STEM or STEAM, which is to infuse science competence in our public. We want this to be universal. We want all our graduates who leave high school to have that connection between what science is about and how it relates to their business, to their everyday world, what you're buying in the supermarket, how you're making, what recipe you might use, how you consume information, what you expect from your media, you know, how it drives what you do when you go on the road. Are you going to wear a mask today? You know, your approach to your vaccines and how you consume the information on that. We want people to be using the science knowledge that they get from school in those ways that come second nature to them. And all the way you're going to get that is if, in fact, you have that throughout all of our high schools. So why I'm bringing that up is that what I heard earlier is this notion of a STEM school or STEM center, STEM academy. And if we were to call it that, I think we would do huge damage to the overall objective. The moment you set up an institution that says it is a STEM institution, then it begs the question, so what are the traditional high schools, or even what we're now calling the vocational schools? If we indeed do achieve this objective of our curriculum being competence-based, then in fact, you'll close the gap between what you're calling a vocational school and a traditional high school, because you'll want to graduate articulate artisans, and you'll want to graduate people who are well-grounded in the principles, but also can actually have competences, because competence includes skills. So we actually want to embrace a kind of more inclusive learning approach. And therefore, in that context, you don't want to set up an institution that says it is a STEM institution. I think what you want to do is say, if you need more schools, if you need more space, say it's a new high school. You can say it's a 21st century high school. But if you now make it distinct by saying it's STEM, then I think you're going to create an unfortunate false dichotomy of which institutions people should be achieving.
You're talking about the question there of equity, and I want to bring in Antoinette Brown's question here and direct it back to the panel for a moment.
Right, thank you. I just wanted to make the point that what we're focused on when we say STEM and STEAM is about making our population more science competent. What we're talking about when we talk about the national standards curriculum is about making our high school curricula more accessible by being competence focused. Now, those two things are not necessarily identical, and it's important we keep that in mind.
Understood. Antoinette Brown is asking, and I want to direct your comment and Antoinette Brown's question as well to Dr. Troop. She's saying, how do these programs work for those who are not in a traditional college or primary school? How do you see that working?
We see the STEM working?
Yes.
Well, STEM, as I indicated earlier, is embedded in our national standards curriculum. So it is being taught through the methodologies that are being utilized in our schools. You heard our principal made mention of the difficulty in translating that, and that's an ongoing challenge, but it's how the disciplines are taught in our schools, how it is delivered, how do we pull on the different tenets from the different areas of science and technology into a common space. So in the general approach, there's an integration from grade 7 to 9 that is taking place across the disciplines. And as you heard earlier, we are seeing where you see the value of the science in everything that you do. And my son is a science student, and you can't get him not to look at the expiry date of something that he takes up in the supermarket, or the content of it, the labeling of it. And that's the application of what he's exposed to in the school. So that's a kind of multi-interdisciplinary approach that we're talking about that is taking place in our schools. Now, if it's happening all the time and how we have designed it to be, that's not happening. But this is what should be, and we have more work to do from the ministry standpoint through the in-service, pre-service training that we continue to deliver for our teachers. That's just something we have to do all the time. Dr. Flowers said earlier in our presentation that knowledge is not static. The methodology is not static. So it's a constant changing and being agile and flexible as we try to deliver and develop this kind of student that we want in our economy for Jamaica. So that's really how it is at the high school level. You know, our participant made mention of the labeling of our schools, and our minister is of the mind that these new schools that we are building out, they are all going to be built, designed around the STEM principles. And that is why we have been labeling them STEM academies. But as we implement further developmental activities in all our schools, you should be seeing that. But this is where we are starting. And that is why you're hearing the label. But the plan is for all our schools. We are going to be revolutionizing. We are looking at the infrastructure in our schools. We have already done an assessment on all our schools, look to see what we have and what we need to make sure that STEM STEAM is permeating through the school in terms of its design, in terms of how we organize for learning. But these schools, we have an opportunity to build them that way. So as you walk into that school, you're seeing the principle permeating through the design. And that helps in sustaining the methodology throughout the program and making sure that that understanding, that kind of student that we want to come out of that institution is sustained as part of the science capital that you heard earlier, that Dr. Archer spoke about, what they talk about, what they do after school, in school. Those are the principles that are being embedded in this design.
And you said a key part of that is this idea of how you treat, how you teach, and how you change how people teach. And that's where I want to take the discussion next by talking about teacher training and capacity building. But first, I want to take a comment from the chat. You see, Michael Bonnick says, design technology, innovation, product design, digital design process should be taught from the primary level. All schools should develop maker spaces to encourage greater engagement with STEAM. Too often schools focus heavily on robotics and forget that some students are leaning towards the arts, architecture, industrial design, inclusive learning, creating an environment that fosters or nurtures multiple pathways. And I see as well, Constant Correa in the chat saying, training for teachers in competence-based teaching and learning is necessary. It can be done. We must include STEAM in all schools and should start there before building new. So I want to take the discussion there with this issue of teacher training and capacity building. I want to bring in Mr. Robinson here first, then Dr. Coy, and we'll take one of the members of the panel from industry, teacher training perspective.
Well, you know, we had to be deliberate because of the necessary mindset change that was needed to implement this. So we had to actually bring in a STEAM trainer to take our staff through deliberate methods of integration, project-based learning, and integration of the disciplines and see how those disciplines work. The use and cross-pollination, which you were looking for earlier, of the disciplines, and that deliberate method in setting up lessons, and to make sure that each department integrates with other departments. So it took us 2 years. We're at the end of a 2-year cycle, and we're still in training to get the staff to adjust, especially in the use. Part of the drawback we've had is that we've not been able to use all the kits that we got from Pittsco and all these places because we've not gone face to face. But the truth is, project-based learning is also absolutely key, and to teach those trained teachers to use the project-based learning, to teach those teachers to use the arts, to use drama, to use music as a part of the delivery is something that is a work in progress. That teacher training is the key element. Things are good. People to deliver is the option that is the challenge that we have. So again, I say that integration of the disciplines, that encouragement of thinking, critical thinking, solving problems, having projects that solve problems even in the school, having projects that solve problems that are relevant to the students so they can see a relevance to their learning. I'll give you a simple example. So we have a very, very good growing program for food and nutrition. The boys cook well. Do you know that they don't see the correlation between cooking and chemistry? They don't want to do chemistry, but they want to cook. So now you have to design a chemistry program for cooks. I mean, if you understand what I'm saying, there is a straight correlation here, but they won't see it. Yeah. They'll tell you they don't want to do chemistry hard, but they want to cook.
Mixing up the colors for the food.
So I'm saying to you, there has to be a deliberate attempt and effort by the schools to grow that teacher capacity and an understanding of how the disciplines integrate and how STEM works in that delivery. And that has to be deliberate. It can't be left for accident. And you have to build that group of teachers in your school that are naturally good at it and learn like ducks in water. And they will take everybody else along.
And you need to do that with teachers at the tertiary level as well. So Dr. Coy, I want to bring you here and bring you in here and then go to Dr. Benjamin from Michael University College.
Right, so this idea of integration is important even at the teacher training level, because when you're doing teacher training, it's difficult to have somebody who is learning to be a literature teacher engage with STEM and STEAM on the face of it. However, outside of them doing the tradition, their specific subject area, then when they're doing teaching and curriculum development, and when they're doing lesson planning, when they're learning about these things, they can be integrated with the science teachers as well. So now what they're understanding is that you don't have to be in a silo, because when you're teaching literature, you can include the STEM concepts. And so when you go into a STEM school or into a school, you can then encourage the development, the cross-pollination, again, that word keeps coming up, of the lesson planning. So when you are going to be teaching about flowers, for instance, and you're doing a poem that describes the flowers, you're talking with the biology teacher, and you're seeing how, okay, you can both integrate your lesson plan so that you are getting the most out of what the student is getting the most out of what is being done in literature and what they're going to do later on in biology class. And when you're doing design arts, you can talk with the computer and the IT teacher to have them develop programs to look at fractals, which look like flowers. And you can then integrate this entire process of teaching and learning. And you're doing that at the teacher training level. You're doing that from the moment they're in high school. So the NSC, from they're in primary school, when they go through high school, when they come into the teacher training institution, it's continued, because we cannot have this process being disjoint. Because when you're a student, you are incorporating STEM and STEAM. And when you come to become now a teacher, that is dropped. We cannot do that. And I think there's a lot of innovation that's going on in the teacher training institutions, and I'm sure Dr. Benjamin will tell you more about that. But that is where we have to go to understand that there is an interdisciplinary nature to all learning, and to infuse that at the level of the teacher training programs.
And you also have to put this in the context of industry as well. I know they have two members of industry, and that's where we're going to be taking the discussion in a moment. But first, Mr. Robinson, and then Dr. Benjamin.
I just want to say it's not a lab you need, it's a culture. It's not a lab that you need. You don't need a STEM lab in your school. Primarily, I'm not saying you don't need to have a STEM lab. I'm saying what you need is an infusion of STEM in the culture and curriculum of the school.
Yes, I say Constant Correa are agreeing with that point in the chat, saying the driver must be to have students appreciate the importance of science and technology in all career areas. The home economics student must understand how chemistry knowledge enhances their knowledge and application of food preparation. So how do you do that, Dr. Benjamin?
Well, I want to endorse, first of all, what Principal Robinson just mentioned about a matter of a culture, but let me borrow a couple of terms that might even highlight the idea as well. The idea of hardware and software. We need to look at what we're doing in relation to this vision, perhaps thinking about it like that. So the hardware, the infrastructure, the buildings, the equipment, and so on. But the software is the curriculum. Now, when we talk about STEM, it's unfortunate, but the idea of thinking about a curriculum, just a bunch of separate subjects, is something that we've been stuck with from the time of the Greeks. And so we are forced now to be thinking about everything as these silos in these different locations. When in real life, as Principal Roberts was mentioning, there is a clear connection between chemistry and cooking, but we have brought ourselves up in such a way as to separate all of these things. Now there's an economy to it, because you can't teach things in a fog, so separate them up into separate areas is quite useful. But ultimately, they now need to be brought back together. I think we lost that whole purpose, ultimately, recognizing that this is not just to pass a course or pass a subject, but it's know how to live. And so they leave school with the understanding of chemistry, physics, and biology and all the different areas, but they never understood how these things are relevant for real life and living. Now, I want to make another point about STEM again, because there are three interpretations about this idea. We're talking about 56, 57, when the Americans were caught off guard. The Russians launched Sputnik, and they decided that, we need to catch up. But when they look in their society, they could not find enough engineers and scientists to come up with a response. And that's where this whole idea of STEM came about. But STEM was about war earlier. Now, ultimately, we're now talking about, as I mentioned to you, how do we live together in peacetime with persons who can solve problems? And that's the core of what STEM should really be thought. Well, at the Jamaica University College, that is how we think of it. So the cultural shift is to move away from these silos and to think of STEM as software for real life, for living. And we put the elements, the main elements of the science and the technology and the engineering and the mathematics into competency-based packages and put them together, integrate them. And it's all about using these ideas to solve real-world problems. Now, maybe one of the ways we can start to get this national trust is what was mentioned by Mr. Smith. He talked about his son's experience being compelled to do certain arts subject, though he was a science student. One of the things that came out of a 2012 conference that we had organized at the Jamaica University College, and we consulted the people from all over the world. We brought people from as far away as Finland. Recently we brought persons from Japan. And we looked at about 17 different presentations. And we came up with what we call the Kingston Declaration. And one of the things that was recommended is for science to be compulsory, one science subject to be compulsory for all students. So that is something that I would suggest is a reasonable policy approach to look at. It is one of the things that is done in, for example, in India. Everybody has to do science. Now, that is the policy side of it, but I'm also thinking about how does this now become something real and relevant? So a teacher, of course, is at the core of all of this. But how does that, get unpacked or cascaded into a situation where at the community level, everybody, all parents, students, everybody wants to participate in this holistic approach to teaching and learning. And what I'm suggesting is that we could look at ensure that the software, the curriculum is, first of all, available throughout our system. We have an excellent national standards curriculum. I take my hats off to the ministry for that. But in terms of the early years, though, in early childhood, we need a similar integrated curriculum. And there needs to be a way, maybe through professional development, that we ensure that the higher school, later years in high school, we also have that. And Principal Robinson points out that if you get them going in the early parts of high school, they'll be fine later on, great. But we need to have it coherent throughout. Now, to make the point though, in terms of the community involvement, that Jamaicans, so let us say, for example, one of the things that came up in our deliberations in the National STEM Task Force Committee was making Jamaica, or take for example, Kingston, a STEM city, make Montego Bay a STEM city, or ultimately to make Jamaica a STEM country. And one of the ways you could do that is by making inroads in the community. So once you have, let us say for argument's sake for the time being, you have a STEM academy in a community. One of the things that STEM academy should seek to do is to solve community problems. And show that science is not just about something you do in school, and some big multiple silos of activities. But if a community has a crime problem, if a community has an employment, whatever the problem is in the community, erosion of the hills or the mountainside, whatever it is that a community, that everybody business with, put it that way in Jamaica, but everybody business within the community, can that school organize itself to solve these kind of problems with the same young people that are going to this school? So there needs to be a real connection between how STEM is viewed as solving real problems and business being able to see, okay, these young people can solve problems. I want to have an incubation center close to these people. I know, for example, my final thought on this, Jamaica National, we went to have a conversation. As usual, Michael, we're always trying to find support for activities on what we do. And we went to Jamaica National, we had a side conversation. And the gentleman was saying to us that one of the things that they did, they had a problem trying to find out how do they make their mortgage process more efficient. And they got some sixth formers to come to Jamaica National and sat down and they said, okay, they have an idea. But they observed that one of the longest part of the process was getting things from titles office. They said, why don't you bring the titles office into your company? Get an office space inside of Jamaica National and put the stamping on that person right in your company. They did that and they cut their mortgage processing down. These are solving real problems. And so that's a part of what we did look at: hardware, software. I understand what was said by the gentleman in the audience, but what Dr. Troop has pointed out and what we have seen is that if you have centers of excellence, you can build from that. Yes, there's the risk of having a STEM academy and becoming an elite separatist place, but if it is managed properly, there's nothing wrong with having these centers of excellence, and then it is allowed. Because, for example, in the United States, you have STEM schools, but then other schools can opt to join by using the software that those schools are using.
Thank you very much, Dr. Benjamin. As Bern Pinnock is saying, two aspects to STEM or STEAM. There is the so-called silos, that word keeps coming up, of STEM student subjects, but more importantly, the culture, a way of life, how we coexist, solve our problems, and facilitate growth and development of our people. And I see Winsome Gordon as well in the chat saying, I agree that education should relate STEM and STEAM to the daily lives of people. When one prepares dinner or a drink, one engages principles of chemistry in the combination of ingredients. Now, we've been talking around them, but they're here in the panel, so we can hear directly from them. So I want to bring the discussion to what the market is expecting. And here I want to bring in Mr. Arturo Caricate from the Jamaica Public Service. What is the market expecting? What is the market requiring of the education sector in the context and in the area of STEAM education?
Good afternoon again. You see, the expectations are wide. And as a country, a lot of things have been said already that put us in the path of really embracing the STEM type of training. Now, what we need is, and I like very much the idea of having step-by-step integration of different schools first, communities, and even parishes when it comes to the STEM education. So from our viewpoint, from the viewpoint of our utility, what we are striving now is to open up our Learning and Development Institute in a way that we will not only be training, and I'm not only training our staff, but actually engaging the large population of Jamaica. And that have been working with us very well. We enter into a memorandum of understanding with HART recently. And we are, for instance, targeting almost immediately the problem that we have with the electrical inspectors. We having an issue right now that with the the fact that it was made private, we have a high demand for the service and have become very costly. So what we have done is try to address that issue that is actually affecting the population the most by training between 80 to 50 to 100 inspectors to actually create fluid in the industry in terms of having more inspectors to actually do the work. And that way reduce the cost of the service for the population. We are looking also at the use of drones, area devices, unmanned area devices as a part of one of the things that we do for our patrolling of our assets, and also to help the NEPA in doing so. Right now we have had a very good season in terms of rain, but we have some serious forest fire, and with the introduction of these and the teaching of the use of drones, actually we will be facilitating a direct industry. The approach from our side is to actually deal with those areas that actually are affecting more the population in Jamaica, the entire nation, the society, and assist them somehow. Similarly, with the use of infrared cameras to actually detect hotspots that lead to our problems with the losses that we have, not just the non-technical, but the technical losses in general. So in few words, what we think that the society is supposed to be doing first is actually addressing those areas that actually are affecting the population, especially during this COVID, where the economic situation is actually really, really, really tough.
Thank you, Mr. Karakarte. I want to bring in Mr. Smith here as well.
So two things I would say that industry, in my opinion, need or requiring: problem solvers. I'd mentioned before, the work environment is complex and it's volatile. The rate at which things are changing is increasing. So the problems are more complex. We need problem solvers. We need persons who can think critically. It's not one way or the other. And that's why so much I support. I should mention that PBS group is part of the wider Musson group, which is highly involved with robotics in schools and coding. Coding teach participants that there's more than one way to solve a problem. There's more than one way of thinking about a problem and coming up with a solution. If we embed that early and have that right through, then the most valuable things now is not the degree that somebody is coming with or the first class honors. It's how they're able to think, how they're able to solve problems, how they're able to not just use what they learned in school, because in 3 years' time, that technology, that thought, the principle will remain surely, but how it's executed or expressed is likely to change. Can they think critically? Can they innovate? Can they solve problems? That is what industry actually needs.
That's what you need. How do you operationalize that? Are there particular, I don't know, is it incentives? Is it sort of policy direction from the ministry that you would like to see so that you can make those partnerships work?
So I would say two things. One, as industry, we have a responsibility to contribute financially, right? And to partner with the educational institutions. So without personalizing it, or I can give the example of my own company. We partner in Trinidad with the University of the West Indies. In Jamaica, we partner with UTech in terms of facilitating the teaching and training of kids or students at the universities, but also in terms of actually solving real world problems that we face. And we have had persons who have come through that training, come on board as trainees, and who are now managers within the company, right? But speaking more broadly, to get persons on who can think critically about a situation and come up with innovative solutions is what industry needs. In this VUCA environment, the way to survive and the way to thrive, I keep coming back to excellence, is not to have all the decision making at the top, but actually to devolve decision making lower in the organization and allow persons lower, quote unquote, in the organization to make those decisions. So it's no longer the CEO as the star CEO who is coming up with all the solutions. No, it is devolved, and responsibility and authority is devolved low, allowing persons to make the decisions and driving innovation closer to the customer, which is really where we want to deliver. It's really to deliver to the customer. So even internally, how business is structured and how it's run and the decision-making process is now being, you'll find more and more companies pushing down the authority and responsibility closer to the customer and at quote unquote lower levels in the organization, which requires those persons with that thinking ability to get the agility that we need. One other thing I would say, again, I don't want to be prescriptive, but I heard Dr. Troop mention earlier about the national curriculum and that it has changed since 2016. Again, I'm not an educator, right? I manage technology right now, but 5 years in technology is a long time. So if we can see that evolved in an agile way, rather than every 6 years, every 7 years, we get the change, then that would be one of my recommendations. Again, I'm not an educator, but just looking on at what industry needs, we need that constant change, the agility, so that what we're churning out to get into industry matches what is actually the needs of the customers and the industry itself.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. We're going to be taking the closing comments now. I'm going to begin with Dr. Troop.
Thank you so much, Archie. I just want to reiterate the point that there's a lot to be done in education. We have, as I indicated, developed the policy. We have been building out the partnerships with our universities, with our international and local partners. But where the rubber hits the road is really what happens in our schools. And you would have heard from our principal about just the targeted approach that he has had to take to make this a reality in our schools. So I would want to see more of that. And as a ministry, we have a responsibility to promote that, to package Wayne's experience and to share that. That's part of the reflective work that we do as leaders in our education system. The Ministry of Education has done its part in terms of the curriculum. You have heard earlier about making sure that the upgrading is constant, keeping in line with the demands of the 21st century, the demands of the workplace. We have more to do in terms of maximizing on the geography of our schools, where our schools exist and what happens within that space, the businesses within that space, how we are solving the problems within that space. That is too far removed from our education system and from the model of delivering our schools. That has to be fixed. But the ministry is committed. Wayne mentioned a point earlier about the resourcing of the curriculum. The ministry has to take that into contemplation. We provide resources, but it is not enough. I can say that. And so we have to also pull on the partnerships so the quality can be demonstrated. The students can get the real opportunities of making the mistakes, of trying, of doing again, doing the problem solving. But we commend our teachers who are in the field, who are working and focusing on the 4 C's, the collaboration, the critical thinking, the communication. Those are very, very important in what we want from our students. The Ministry of Education took also a bold step in changing the way we assess our students. And you see the PEP. The PEP is not just an exam that allows for students to regurgitate facts. It's about thinking, the ability to test. If you go into that as adults in this space, you can relate to it. It's very difficult if you're not interacting with the curriculum. It forces our students to think and to problem solve and to bring reasoning to a problem. That's what we are doing. And in Jamaica, if you're not assessing in that perspective and approach, you're not going to get the push into the critical thinking and the skills orientation that we want. So the ministry is committed. We have more work to do though, and we stand guided by the experiences on the ground.
Dr. Benjamin?
Thank you, Archibald. Yes. Well, my closing thoughts would be that we have to just piggyback on something that Dr. Chu mentioned, the sense that we seem not to be as close as we should be. That is education and solving the real world community-based problems and challenges. And I think that's one of the main things that we have to recognize that STEAM educational approaches allow for, that there's not this sort of a disconnect in countries that have managed to make progress. They have eliminated that disconnect. In fact, Finland has done it so well that they have actually disconnected themselves from their universities. Universities now have to find their own ways of testing to get persons to enter, because what they've done is move the population into being entirely work ready. I don't know if we want to make it as extreme as that, but the disconnect is a mistake, and we need to move beyond that to recognizing that the case that we have now in Jamaica was 60 to 70% of our work age, working cohort don't have any other CSEC subject. Those magic pills to allow them to participate in the economy. That is something that really is of concern. So we have to find ways of continuing to pull the education system closer and closer and closer to addressing some of these real problems. And I believe that the national standards curricula is an excellent step and a key step, a bold step in the right direction. As I mentioned, we need to find curricula for the early education and continue perhaps from the excellent example set by Jamaica College to see how we can make sure at least the early years of high school continue with STEM or STEAM approaches, and so that we have all the students when they leave either also being more interested in taking these STEM courses at the end, but even if they are not, they have the competencies that Mr. Smith mentioned about critical thinking, about solving problems, and of course being able to communicate. And key, I think one of the main things the arts are for that we all enjoy so much is the creativity that comes there. So the Mike University College is interesting in what we call the integrative, fully in line with the ministry's national standards curriculum, the integrative approach, where we are not looking at just the subject areas, but we want to have a situation. The president of the Mike University College, Dr. Pinnock, his expectation that all teachers leaving the Mike and all teachers in the system would have these STEM competencies. And I think one of the key things, if we have teachers who are predisposed or think of teaching as solving problems, and if we can have that as being the characteristic, a teacher is a problem solver, I think we will have a lot of the cascade down through the classroom, because it will affect all subjects and I believe the majority of our learners. Thank you.
Mr. Robinson?
Well, I'll be succinct. We are going through systemic and systematic changes in how we deliver our education, and STEAM is where we're going and where we're at, and a work in progress. There's an area that is bothersome and drives how students want to perform, and that's assessment that Kassan mentioned earlier. And we've been used to growing up assessment of learning. So you assess what has been taught. And then, of course, as you grow and change, you now have assessment for learning. And if you remember what Professor said earlier, where we need to go is assessment as learning. And it is important because that as learning will drive you to prepare for the world outside, and will assess the move you've made in all the things we've spoken about, creativity, the integration, that change in the mindset of how we assess students, and how schools choose as learning over of learning is going to be important to the change that we make as infusion STEAM in all of the curriculum. Yeah. Because it's a doing thing.
Dr. Coy?
Well, my concluding comments surround cohesion and collaboration. what we're looking for if we're going to have a STEM ecosystem is just that, an ecosystem where you have clearly defined roles for all the participants, for all the stakeholders. And not only do you have these clearly defined roles, but you have communication between the partners. And you have this idea where everybody is pulling in the same direction. And I don't have to develop something novel when it is being done elsewhere. And I don't have to be reined in because what I'm doing is counterintuitive or it's antithetical to what the entire project ought to be about. And if I were to prescribe any kind of policy, it would be that there is this close-knit working between all the partners. So the tertiary level, the high school, the primary school, the policy level, industry, all of that has to come together if we're going to move this forward and have a successful STEAM ecosystem.
Mr. Sarah, online.
I don't see much about.
We're going to be moving on to Mr. Caricarte. Final comments.
I lean to the area of collaboration. And you see, many of us here representing different organizations and different approach to the same problem, probably having these forums and in our collaboration between ourselves, we actually help us to implement and actually overcome the challenges that we have to have the STEM system of education implemented, not just in a few areas as we have it now, but countrywide. That's it.
Thank you. And Mr. Smith.
So two things. One, I think our challenge, the challenge that I'd like to throw to this team is what's the strategy and action plan to actually build this ecosystem? Because it will benefit everyone involved. It will benefit the educators, it will benefit the kids, it will benefit industry. How do we build this ecosystem? How do we create a deliberate effort to build this ecosystem? This is something that I've thought about for a long time. It's something that we have tried also to work at, but it needs a deliberate effort. So that's one. The other thing too is communication, and I'm throwing this to the educators on the panel. Communication of the strategy and plans of I'm going to say the Ministry of Education, and I mean that in the broadest sense, the educators. Even participating on this panel, I'm learning of things that's in the pipeline, but may not be widely known throughout industry. So in developing a communication plan, my suggestion include industry in that plan. There are various industry organizations that can be used as that platform, whether it's JCC, RPSO, JR, et cetera, and I believe, and I would recommend that the communication of what's already in progress and what the plans are is something also that is needed. Those would be my two closing comments, Archibald.
Thank you very much, Mr. Smith. And I want to thank all of my panelists. And I am going to be asking for the vote of thanks to be moved, and really the summary of what we have talked about today. We're hearing a lot of different discussions about a lot of different areas. We heard about the importance of collaboration. We heard about the importance of communication. We also heard overall about the importance of partnership. How do you get the partnerships at different levels to be able to get this national vision for STEAM education ready in Jamaica? How do you get ahead when you have so many sorts of different challenges dealing with at the same time. So again, I want to thank my panelists who made this fireside chat possible. First of all, I'd like to thank Dr. Casson Troop. She's Acting Chief Education Officer at the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information. Dr. Albert Benjamin, he joined us online. He's Vice President of Academic Affairs, Acting Vice President of Academic Affairs at the Michael University College. Mr. Wayne Robinson, to my right, the Principal, Acting Principal of Jamaica College, Dr. Andre Coy, lecturer in the Department of Physics at the Faculty of Science and Technology at the University of the West Indies, Mona. Mr. Louis Serra, who joined us online as well, Regional Schools and Non-Formal Education Head at British Council Americas. Mr. Arturo Caricarte is Manager of Technical Training, the Learning and the Development Institute at the Jamaica Public Service, and Mr. Anthony Smith, who is Chief Operating Officer at PBS Technologies. And now I would like to invite to move the vote of thanks, Ms. Latoya Harris, Acting Executive Director of the National Education Trust.
Thank you, Archibald, and thank you to our panel. I note that one of the key things coming out of today's forum, and which we wanted, because we're starting a discussion on what we want STEAM. And I'm embracing STEAM and not STEM because the art is so important to Jamaica, and we want to ensure that we contextualize it because our children, as we become learner focused, our children have to be at the forefront of everything we do, and arts is an important part of the Jamaica culture, vibes and everything. Today is the epitome of what we're talking about when it comes to partnership, because it wouldn't have been possible without the partnership between the British Council, ourselves, and the Ministry of Education. And then also we recognize the importance as we execute the STEAM project to integrate at all levels and to get feedback, and throughout the project, which we foresee for the next 8 years, we want to ensure that we get the key players, which means our principal. Thank you, Mr. JC. And I call him Mr. JC because he's my good friend. We work a lot together because partnership is Net's business. I should tell you that. We're a registered charity. It's our business. And everything we do in terms of galvanizing resources, we do with the help of all stakeholders. You will recognize that the panel was designed today to get the voices of the university, the teacher training institution, the schools through the principal, and also we did not forget, because our education system is not divorced. Our education system is training the workforce of tomorrow. So we made sure to include 2 key entities in our economy that is driven a lot by STEAM. So Professor Anthony Clayton, in a recent article, he said that by 2050, of the 6 billion that's in the workforce, 5 billion will be doing jobs that do not exist today. Let that sink in. Of 6 billion, 5 billion people will be doing jobs that don't exist today in 2050. What this means is that the nation and the nation that prepares its children via education and training for the future will prosper. Jamaica has no choice but to ensure that STEAM is rolled out in such a way that it becomes part and parcel of the DNA fabric of our education system. We must be agile and innovative. And I like what one of our panelists said today, that STEAM is a software for living. And that's how we have to think about it. So I want to thank Professor Archer. And I hope that the British Council has that presentation, because we have already received several requests for it, because it really drills down into that need to look, mindset change, not just mindset change of our teachers, but mindset change of our entire society to embracing STEAM, sorry. What today also reinforced for us is that, or let us know, is that we have a base in the standards curriculum, the national standards curriculum. And from that base, we need to focus on becoming more learner-centered. And I think that a lot of that is tied to our own recognition of the child as an individual with its own unique rights, its own unique take on life. And now, as educators, as persons, is to mold the minds and allow our children to really grasp and explore and become critical thinkers that will contribute to business competitiveness and creating economies and enterprises to drive economic growth. So what should STEAM look like for Jamaica? For my major takeaway is that it's learner-centered, it's practical, real-life experiences infused throughout the teaching and learning. What we need: mindset change, partnerships, and an approach to teaching where the teachers themselves recognize that they may not be the body of knowledge of everything. And you, as a teacher yourself, is learning. And you are embracing having your student come to that classroom with a different way to interpret and to do things that you may not have even envisioned. So learning becomes not just something for the student, but for the teacher. And I think if we can get that right, we will get STEAM right. So what can you expect? Right now, the British Council is undertaking a research where basically we're baselining where we are, seeing what are the barriers and what needs to be done for STEAM education in Jamaica. Because as I said, this project is premised on partnerships. So once we have that, we will, because this is the first in a two-part series of forum on STEAM education. And once that's complete in about March, we will have a second forum to show you what the research is saying, what's on the ground. You will also hear from us in terms of, I know you've heard about the building of the schools, and some people say, why build these new schools and not work on the system? The reality is that there's a deficit at the secondary level for school spaces. The beauty is that we can design these schools to be green schools. We can design these schools to be the environment that we all envision, that we had when we were in school. If we're going to embrace STEAM, then the environment has to enable that. It has to foster that imagination. It has to give the children free rein. You have a chemistry experiment that goes wrong, you need to be able to run outside quickly. I'm just saying. So how we design the schools is a critical part of what we want to achieve from this, because we want to change what a school looks like and feels like. So yes, we'll be doing the schools, the construction. We're embracing green technology. We're embracing all things solar, for example, all, you name it, gardens on the roof. We're open. And next year, you should hear more as we launch a design competition so that we can get really take ourselves out of it, because we've been building schools so long, and allow fresh minds into the design space of our schools. We recognize, and a significant part of the project is institutional strengthening of schools, the governance and management arrangements, the ICT support for the education system, and capacity building and quality improvement for schools and teacher training institutions. So we have built in these different components into the project, And we will be doing, we have started to do different elements of it. And we just want to thank everybody. I want to thank our minister this morning, the Honorable Favor Williams, for coming to share with us. I want to thank Her Excellency Judith Slaughter, the British High Commissioner. I want to also thank Miss Marsh from British Council, who shared online. I can't say it enough. Dr. Flowers, well, you have a passion for the curriculum. I know it's your pet peeve, and I'm sure you're heartened by your colleagues today in the space, because to be an educator is one thing, and to be an educator acknowledging the brilliance of the work that you've done. Congratulations, because I think that's the base of everything, So we have a good foundation. If you're building a house, you want a good foundation, right? So we have that. So as we now put on the layers, build up the walls, put on the roof, what I want to really close on, well, before I close, I want to thank Dr. Troop for joining, Dr. Benjamin, Mr. Robinson, Mr. Serrano, Mr. Katere, Mr. Coy, of course, our moderator, Mr. Smith. Did I miss anybody? I think I covered everybody. I want to thank you for coming today and for joining us and for sharing your insights, because those insights now will be used to structure the project, so it's input into the project to ensure that we're on the right path, because net bills one, and work on partnerships. We're not educators at the core, and we need all parties on board. So I want to close on the point of partnerships, because that's the recurring theme I heard. JC got its start with its support from its alumni. Dr. Coy spoke about the partnership with the foundation. Education in Jamaica has always been sustained through partnerships. And I don't think we will ever get away from that. And I think that is something that persons need to understand, that the government will never be able to supply everything. And they shouldn't have to, because education is everybody's responsibility. So I want to encourage everybody to really answer their phones when we call. We may not be calling, we may be calling for money, yes, financial, to back an initiative. But at the same time, we everybody that was on this forum today answered the call to come and share their knowledge and experience. And at this stage, through project development and implementation, that's really what's critical for us. And as we execute the different elements. So I ask that everybody answer that call for partnership to ensure that the National STEAM project is a success, because too much is riding on this, and we cannot fail. This is how we're going to transform education, and this is how we're going to get our students integrated properly into society. So thank you, and thanks everybody. Thanks the media for being here. Thank you to the tech team. Thanks to everybody who's online that tuned in. If you have something that you want to share with us, if you have suggestions, you can always email that to info@net.org.jm. And let me repeat, info@net.org.jm. And we will take every suggestion into consideration, because a part of the project is stakeholder engagement, and everybody is a stakeholder. So thanks. Over to you, moderator.
All right, thank you very much, Ms. Harris. And thank all of you for joining us this morning into afternoon, really, as we had this discussion about setting the stage for a national vision for STEAM education in Jamaica. I am Archibald Gordon, and have a good afternoon.